Hello and welcome to this conversation that has been organized by Rolly Books. I am going to be speaking with Kobad Ghandy, Gautam Vohra and Ishaat Hussain. My name is Abhinandan Sekhri from Newslaundry. And in case you're wondering why the four of us are talking, and while we usually ensure that we don't have panels, we always have women on our panels. This is different and special because for one, we are going to be talking about Kobad's book, Fractured Freedom. Those of you who have been following Kobad Ghandy's case and life in the last decade, as I have, being a news professional. But even if you're not, you have seen how dramatic, disturbing, and at least for me, it's rather scary, but he seems to wear that rather lightly. And why are Gautam and Ishaat here? Well, Gautam and Ishaat are classmates of Kobad, and this conversation is going to be taken to another level because they can talk about what the evolution of Kobad has been since they knew him in school. And why I am thrilled to be hosting this is because I am from the same school. We are all alumni of the Doon school. And I have known of these gentlemen. I don't know these gentlemen because we were 3 decades apart.
At least.
But we did walk. Fractured Freedom is Kobad's book, where you can read about his dramatic life. While it seems fun and games, I have read not all of it, but it is amazing what this man has been through. So first, let me introduce Kobad Ghandy, the author of the book.
Hi,
Kobad.
Hi, Abhinandan.
Pleasure having you.
Nice to be on Newslaundry. It's such a good
Well,
site.
actually, you are... Yeah, thank you so much for the compliment. The Rolly Books is the one who is organizing it, but Newslaundry is always happy to partner with them. So though you, our guests, our viewers know what Kobad does. But Gautam, why don't you introduce yourself? What do you do?
Well, when I left university, I took to journalism, in fact, like you. And I was with the Times of India for 15 years. I was taken in as assistant editor, and I eventually became editor of Sunday Times. And while I was working on various development issues, I even covered the Naxalite movement in Andhra Pradesh and did a lot of traveling to cover events in various states. I began to realize that there was something more that could be done other than writing. And that is why after 15 years, I left journalism and set up an NGO. And that NGO is now working in organic farming, worked with tribals in Maharashtra, has an organic farm in Haryana. That's what my friends are seeing on WhatsApp these days. And we have a school and a women's center in West Delhi.
I see. And when you were reporting on the Naxalite movement, was Kobad active politically at the time? Was there an overlap?
Well, he must have been, but I didn't know. And anyway, after reading his book, I realized he was more in the Nagpur region. You know, I'd gone to Andhra. And amazingly enough, it's the Andhra police that have filed a case against him, I don't know how, because he was never in that area. Nagpur and Bastis in the north of Maharashtra.
And Ishaat, would you like to introduce yourself and how long you have known Kobad?
Well, Abhinandan, just like Gautam, in fact, Gautam, Kobad and I joined school the same day, sometime in August of 1958. I don't know, for some odd reason, Gautam went straight to the house, but you will appreciate the difference. Kobad and I went to Holding House. And so I've known Gautam and since then. We were roommates, classmates, played games together. And Kobe, I can call him that, we really lost touch for many, many years. I used to see him in Bombay off and on before he left for England, but I used to see him in London and till 1969. And then Kobad and I lost touch completely for 50 years. And we met at my flat in 2019, just after he came out of jail. And I was very concerned, you know, if I just showed up or sent Kobad an email, how he'd respond. So I consulted Gautam, and Gautam said, no, you must get in touch with him immediately. And I sent him an email, and before I knew anything, he had responded. And after that, we've been meeting each other very frequently, as long and of course speak very, very often on the phone. And after, I went into the corporate world. I worked in the corporate world for over 40 years. I held various positions. I was in Tata Sons. And finally, when I retired in 2017, I thought I'd also join my good friends in the NGO world. So now I'm on about 5 NGOs as trustee stroke director.
So yeah, I mean, this is a interesting mix, but I think boarding school does that. Someone who has held leadership positions in corporate India, and Kobad, of course, who ideologically I'm sure is opposed to what corporate India or crony capitalism, how he may decide to define it, would the ideology you think that would represent. But Kobad, one thing is clear,
Yes.
that over the last decade or so, longer, you have been in, I think, 4 or 5 prisons across India.
Yeah, longest in Tihar, 6 or 7 prisons, basically. Tihar, Hyderabad, Vishaka, 2 in Jharkhand, Patiala and Surat. But Patiala, Surat was just a month or so each. The cases went very promptly. The main thing was in Tihar, 7 years over one case.
So, I mean, the idea to write a book came because you had so much of time to think in prison and not much to do, or is it a ideological thing you want to put out there to try to convince others that your way is the right way? What is the motivation behind the book?
Actually, throughout the jail journey, I had no intention of writing a book because I didn't know where it was going to lead. The cases were just dragging on and on and on. And even when I was released finally in 2017, December, in 3 days' time, I was rearrested. So in fact, one didn't know where, and the cases, as Gautam mentioned earlier, was all places which I've never even heard of. Achampet, Narayanpet, all these places I had never heard of, and cases were put. Tenughat in Jharkhand, I first thought it was in somewhere in Sholapur or something. Yeah, that's what the case was, but I just didn't know where these were. So if they can cook up such cases all over the place, and the way the cases were dragging on and on and on, I was not sure I'll ever get out. And even if I did get out, whether I'll get out alive. 18 cases all over the country in places I've not known. So I didn't give it a thought. I was writing in jail, in mainstream. I was writing articles on the Indian economy, on anything that disturbed me, because we had access to newspapers and magazines. That was never stopped. So that I was reflecting my feelings and to various issues, right from demonetization to even budget analysis and things like that, which I've been doing. But it was only at the last stage of the journey when I reached Surat jail that I thought that I need to. Actually, it was in Jharkhand the idea came to me, because when all this nationalism and this was going on, I was talking to a Don who was very helpful with me in Hazaribagh jail. And the thing came out, all this nationalism and people talk about, and the president, everyone's talking about nationalism and patriotism and all that. I felt that at that time it struck me that why shouldn't I put my story, because it was purely racist against racism. That means with a nationalist spirit that I came to communism, and it was only to serve the people of our country and development in our country that I came to this ideology at that time. So that it struck me at that time, but I didn't take it further. But when I was in Surat and when it looked as though things were coming to an end, I started making notes and jottings about the jail diary. And as I started writing and discussing with people, the book evolved into an autobiographical type of thing. And also, of course, I did want to, in the third section, carry the viewpoint, because I felt my 50 years of experience has brought out a lot of some sort of lacunae also within the communist movement, within the communist methodology, which I wanted to present also. I had presented in articles in mainstream in 2012 in a rudimentary form, but I wanted to develop it, which I want to develop even further in future. But
your nudge to communism was because of the racial kind of prejudice that you faced when you were studying in UK, right?
Yeah, it was because of racism actually that my eyes opened at that time. as Gautam will also bring out, at that time, there was all this Tariqali movement against Vietnam and this and that. There was a huge communist upsurge worldwide. And at first, I was thought I'd go to, I read Gandhi because he fought apartheid in South Africa. But I didn't find answers. And finally, the whole atmosphere was such that everyone was veering towards communism. And actually, it was the communist groups that were taking up the issue of racism in
But
UK.
before you faced this racial prejudice or you experienced it firsthand in Britain, were you politically inclined? Were you inclined towards?
Absolutely no. Absolutely zero. I had this Doon school and then Xavier's College and everything. I mean, we had studied Animal Farm for Cambridge, seen in Cambridge.
So there was no
And
chance that
I
you
only knew communism, snowball, and knew Napoleon and such things. All I knew about communism leads to dictatorship and things like that. I had absolutely no inkling about any of these aspects, even racism. And when I came to India, I knew nothing about casteism. Though afterwards, I fought on caste issues and which communists don't take up. But
so it was rather late in life that you kind of discovered it. You know, Gautam, I read your piece even when Kobad was in prison, and what would become of him was unclear. And I remember there was Operation Green Hunt, and Chidambaram's big push to clean out Maoism from the country. I read a piece that you had written in the Doon School alumni magazine called The Rose Bowl. And in the same Rose Bowl, I don't know if it was exactly on the other side of the page, but I remember showing it to there was an article on Kamal Nath, who was, I think, the surface transport minister or something. And I was like, here's an article on Kobad Ghandhi, who was this celebrated ideological terrorist or whatever they described him. And in the same magazine, there was an article on Kamal Nath. What did you, when you were in school, what was Kobad like? Did you ever think that he's most likely to spend a decade in jail student? Or, was he ideological? And when he went in, did you ever feel that as a DOSCO, this is something that Doon should either be proud of or be ashamed of? Or how did, what made you write that article in the Rose Bowl on Kobad?
But before Gautam comes, let me tell you, Gautam has been there right from day one, helping out. Right from the very first day, he even came to Hazaribagh jail. Now Gautam can continue.
Yeah, no, what I wanted to say first, just on the side on Kamal Nath, by the way, he's a classmate of ours. Huh?
Same batch.
And roommate also.
Same batch. He got left behind a year. He was with us, he got left behind. And he's a good friend of all of us. I mean, I've kept in touch with him. I'm sure Ishaat has. Kobad has been away. So, it's ironical that
the roommate
different people are in the same...
He was your roommate, Kobad.
Huh?
Yeah, he was for some time.
So that's one. At that time, Kobad, what I remember him was, you see, public schools, I mean, as you are familiar, Abhinandan, is that, if you play sports and you're out active, you're noticed. I think Kobad was, as I've said, on the quiet and retiring side. And it is only later on, when he emerged from college, I think, when he got involved in developmental work, I would call it, I won't call it social work, developmental work that led to an ideological training that took him to Marxism, that I think he lost his withdrawn nature. He came out and because he felt strongly about things. So I think it has to do with that transformation from a relatively quiet, withdrawn individual who did well in his studies, but was not active in public school in the sense that sports makes you come out. But he came out in a different fashion much later.
And when he was going through this transformation, were you in touch with him at the time? Did you observe any transformation slowly? Like
yes,
Ishaat met him then and met him years later. So
yeah, no, I met Kobad a couple of times because I was a journalist. Kobe was around. He was in Bombay. He used to visit Bombay. So a couple of times I met him. And I was very struck by the kind of work he was doing. And at that time, we were in 22, 23, 24, more concerned with our own careers. So when we met, it was basically affection and laughter, but not too deep probing. But I knew that the path the Kobad had taken was quite remarkable from, I mean, I may have felt strongly about issues and I wanted to write about them, and I was willing to do anything to go to those places wherever the action was or where there was injustice. But here, a guy was really taking on the system, taking on the state. And
did you worry? Did you worry for him? Did you think
at that time, you see, I didn't know the depth of his event. I said we were in our mid-20s and we were more concerned with our own careers, but I knew that he was doing something remarkable. That's something that if I had the guts, and we've discussed it in different ways, if I had the capacity to declass myself and take on and live with the poor and be part of that, that I could sense was not in me, and I could sense that was in Kobad and his young wife. I don't know whether you were married then, but I'd met her at that time also.
Married in 77.
So yeah, around that time when I met you,
yeah.
So Ishaat, what are your recollections of Kobad? Did you think he would be most likely to spend a decade in jail when you were in school? Were you saddened about the path he took? Did you agree? Did you disagree? Did you ever have lively debates like we all do with our classmates who choose different things and paths?
No, Abhinandan, I've written a little piece in Kobad's book, which has been produced, which talks about rediscovering Kobad. It ends with, I'm lucky that I'm fortunate that I rediscovered Kobad. No, I didn't imagine that, first of all, we were not that political when we were in school. But subsequently, many of our classmates went into politics in a big way, and two of them were chief ministers. No, I didn't see that in Kobad. What I did see in Kobad, and he was my very dear friend, like Gautam, Kobad didn't have a mean bone in him, He had no mean streak in him. He was an extremely good-natured person.
That's very Parsi.
Very kind person. My son-in-law is a Parsi, but I may tend to agree with that. But he didn't have a mean bone in him, and he was gentle. Like Kobad, Gautam was a very good sportsman. I was a better sportsman than Kobad, but I was not of the school level. I didn't have a games blaze or anything. But we were all, in our own ways, we were discovering ourselves. And what I really found is that many of our friends in school, who were the gangbusters, so to say, they just fizzled out. And many boys who you never thought in school would really shine out, actually shone out. And really, we evolved differently. We evolved at a different pace and in very different directions, like you saw which way Kobad went. No, I didn't imagine that Kobad would finally take the path which he took, and he took a very radical path, no doubt about it, which I admire greatly, and I think.
So Ishaat, let me ask you this.
If you ask me, I also wouldn't think that I would have taken that path.
I have a lot of other questions for you, Kobad, but Ishaat, let me ask you this, and answer as honest as you can, because you have served as so-called a captain of industry. You have done an exemplary job in running organizations that have added to the welfare of our economy, no doubt. Do you think, and whoever I speak to who knew Kobad in school tells me that he was really bright. Do you think he could have added or been a lot more service to the country had he chosen a path of a more conventional nature? Do you think he could have propagated an ideology that is good, that is ethical, that is fair, yet do it in a way that kind of conforms to what public schools prepare us for?
Abhinandan, it's one of the ifs of history, it's impossible to, but all that I can say is that I'm very proud of what Kobad has achieved. And I really am proud. And I can't weigh it against Gautam's achievement or my achievement, but Kobad's is exemplary. It stands out. It stands out. And
I guess it's.
But I have no doubt that had Kobad followed, he was very bright. If he had become a CA, he would have outshone me for sure. I have no doubt about that. But as I said, whatever he chose to do, he did what he believed was right. And I think very few of us really can turn around and say that with any great conviction. But I think Kobad can.
No doubt. Kobad, let me just read out the dedication of your book. And I have not finished it, but I have read more than half.
Yeah.
And I'm blown away by how dramatic your life has been. But this really is really poignant, and it's extremely touching. I just want to read it and ask you a question of a slightly personal nature related to this. You said this book is dedicated to my late wife Anuradha, fondly called Anu, in whom I saw all that was good in society. Her commitment to truth and justice and her idealism could dispel the darkness of a benighted world. Anu's courage of conviction, simplicity, straightforwardness, her intelligence and honesty made her the ideal social activist. Clearly, she meant a lot to you, and I have read about her even before I read your book. There was a piece I read about, her passing. I think maybe you only wrote that for a publication. Now, you have faced immense loss because of the life both you and Anu chose. You could have had a very different old age than you do now. So I have two questions. One, how do you still maintain this lively, fun personality in spite of the immense loss that you have undergone in your personal life? Like, what's so funny? If you know what I mean. And do you feel that too much has been taken away from you for the rest of your life to reward you adequately for?
Well, I don't know, but I feel that what we set out to do, both Anu and myself, we tried to do it fully. And I felt that, of course, if more attention had been given, maybe Anu could have been saved from death at that time. But her health was deteriorating with systemic sclerosis. So how she would have taken old age also, I'm not so sure. So maybe, I don't know, everyone looks at it. It took me about 4 or 5 years to get over her loss. Then I finally got over it, and I felt that what I saw in her, the good qualities which I saw in her, which are not so prevalent, I found in the other circles. I thought that it would be a good model to present before people, so that coming generations can learn from this. It was also a living model. It's also the points I raise as the values one needs to have. But since there was a living model of that, I thought to present it in her. And that's why I've taken so much. I've written articles on the same thing earlier also, like from jail, and I felt that this Anu was that type of model. Of course, if she had lived, it would have been much better. But we all have to die, and sometimes.
When did you meet her? How did you get to know her? And what did you learn from her? And finally, when she was ill, did you ever at any point, you or her, have that slight kind of tendency to say, you know what, let's get back to a city life so that she can be treated, because of the kind of life you led that wouldn't allow the kind of medical attention that she needed to be given?
Well, actually, we met in 1972. As soon as I came back from London, there was this program, Alternative University. That time she was a vivacious student leader in Elphinstone College. And Jyoti, her friend, classmate, has written a lot about her, which I quoted in the book. And that gives a picture. She knew her before I knew her. So she portrayed a picture of the type of person she was in college, even before she became so politically and committed. And so then slowly we got involved. Of course, she was a very good intellectual, as Jyoti brings out in her article. She would have been one of those top intellectuals, academics, if she had gone on in that line. But she also chose to leave that life and work for the masses and people. And then we both moved to Nagpur. Of course, in the later years, it was a little bit difficult. It was getting a bit difficult because with old age and health problems, it was. And the trouble is, in these type of communist movements, one never retires. We keep going on and on and on. So that aspect didn't come. And she had an autoimmune disease, which is not very easily treatable. In fact, it has no cure as such. And she was taking some mushroom tablets and all that. But I did think when she had come back and I knew I was in Delhi at that time, I thought that now I must spend more time with her and looking after her health. But by then it was too late. When I got there and she went to the hospital, she went into coma and died. So at that time, I did feel, though not retirement as such, but I did feel that more attention needed to be given to her. And she was a type of person who never demanded attention. I mean, one couldn't realize, unless you saw, really went deep into seeing her, he wouldn't show her illness anywhere. You couldn't tell that she was suffering that much. But because she just wouldn't show that at all. And sometimes probably I didn't take that into cognizance also. Then I could have given more attention. But certainly I did feel that when then I have time when she passed away. And it was just, but these things happen. Think in our type of lives, there's any retirement or anything like that. And we didn't consider, but I did feel that it had come to a place where we needed to be more settled and she needed looking after.
I have another question before I move to Gautam, which is that what is the kind of opposition you faced from your immediate family when you decided to abandon your pursuit of chartered accountancy and justify your education and the money spent on it instead of going down the road you went?
Yeah, actually, we were very lucky. Both Anu's parents and my parents were extremely supportive. Even Anu's parents I can understand because they had come from a communist background. They had got married, in fact, in 1940. But my parents, my father was finance director and all, but surprisingly, he was very democratic. And when I was in London and was shifting to this type of ideology and this type of work and all that, we used to have long debates and letters. And finally, he in fact came around to my view. And he was very proud of that. And right till his death, I mean, he was a solid support. We used to go, he was in Mahabaleshwar, then in Panchgani, and we used to go there regularly. Some of our activist cadres, we used to have study classes in Mahabaleshwar in his small outhouse type of hotel. And he would have long discussions with them. He read all our literature. I mean, he totally turned. He was a bit like many people were demoralized when China went back and when the movement also collapsed and things like that. But otherwise, he was a total, he had come around completely. And so also my mother was at that time, but she died young. So in fact, we've got, both of us had enormous support from our parents. And when we decided not to have children, not to give up the family, this thing, money and all, they completely support. They said, we look after the child, both the parents. He said, no, if we have to have children, we should look after it and enjoy the company.
That explains your sprightly nature and your smile. You have a lot to thank. I don't know if you believe in God as a communist, but I guess you have a lot to thank your life for, even if you hold much against it.
Really. And even now, my sister is supporting me. I'm staying at her place and things like that. So she may never be as agreeable with the ideology, but like my father was, but very supportive. So I mean, I've really been lucky, and Anu's family also is close to me. So
Gautam, from Kobad's book, can you tell me the bits that you found most moving, inspiring, or disturbing? What part of his very dramatic life, and I can't say that enough, do you find something that grabs your attention more than other parts?
See, inspiring, it's obvious that he could take on the system and take it on with such courage. That is the inspiring part. I found a lot of it very disturbing. Disturbing in the sense that the Indian state, let me say, before I make the other comment, on the whole, the judicial system came through. Kobad is free. They couldn't prove a single thing. To that extent, I'm grateful and have been always conscious that the Indian judicial system, despite the drawbacks and the bureaucracy, is good and solid. But the treatment he was meted out in prison, the way cases were filed again and again, how can you tolerate that? How can you accept that? I mean, my blood is to boil. You know, I see Kobad accepting all this. Of course, he rages against it to some extent in the book, but not half as much I would rage if I felt the kind of indignities, the wrongs, the calumny, so much that annoys and angers and enrages. And yet he continued to work. I mean, that's in the prison. Outside it, he was taking on the system and giving of himself. And sometimes I've wondered, how is it that the Communist Party is so broken up that they cannot back this young man? Why aren't they greater? Why isn't there greater cohesion and cooperation? Here's a man who's totally dedicated and doing things, but he didn't become part of any of the CPI, CPM, let alone that. Even I don't think he was, though they call him a Maoist, I don't think he was part of any bigger group. So these are the things that are still in my mind, that he didn't become part of the group. He kept on working on his own. And in a sense, and I'm being naughty, how is he any different than me as an NGO working in the busties of Delhi, or in the rural areas of Haryana, or in the tribal pockets of this thing? That was palliative work. We reached out, we made them conscious, made them aware of their rights. I mean, he was doing 10 times more, but I do not know whether if he was linked to the other mass organizations of the communists, they could have brought over us a mini revolution. NGOs can only bring about small changes. He could have if there was a backing, and he had no backing. I don't know why he wasn't. This is what I need him to explain.
But before I come to Ishaat, Kobad, why exactly were you picked on, do you think? I mean, like Gautam says, you weren't a part of any larger operation, or like what about you got
Actually,
you into the community?
the thing is that if you see that period, 2007 onwards, 2006-7, when Sen was there, then in Bombay a whole lot of arrests took place, and none of these people were really, they were doing sort of on the fringes of revolutionary type of work, but more reform and linked to mass organizations and things like that, not hardcore types, any of these people. And there was a series of arrests during that period when Manmohan Singh said that these are the greatest internal greatest
the biggest internal threat
to
the nation, right?
That I could understand, because if you see, the Maoists had really were at its peak at that time. 80% of Nepal was in their control, and right down to Lalgarh movement was starting, and then Bihar, Jharkhand, then Chhattisgarh, then Andhra, and right down to Tamil Nadu and Kerala, even Karnataka, parts of it. I mean, they called it the Red Corridor. So really 1/3 of the country was that time being so-called disturbed. Of course, now it's only restricted to 1 or 2 pockets. But at that time, they were really worried. And Manmohan Singh had made it clear also. After all, he is also.
So would you say you were collateral damage of that entire Operation Green Hunt, Salvajudum?
Because virtually everyone else was. Vinayak Sen also, so many others. A lot of people arrested in Bombay also took place, and all over the country also, probably also. Of course, in that period, in Andhra since the late 90s, I believe I was told in Hyderabad jail, there was no arrests at all. There were only encounter killings. So they had wiped out everything.
Wow.
So it was that type of aggressive policies of the state at that period. And I was part of that whole thing. And that continues today, we see, with the Koregaon Bim thing and all that stuff.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think
that was really a that was really a period. But now, actually, I don't know why it's so distinct, because now it's just restricted to a few pockets. Andhra I was surprised when I was in Andhra, Hyderabad jail and Visakhapatnam jail. I found there's nothing out there. The whole new generation knew nothing about what's Naxalism, though Naxalism was mainstream in Andhra at one time. Or not one time, for a long time.
I think the things have moved on to other. You can belong to other groups, but Ishaat, from your reading of the book, any moments that stand out for you that you find remarkable that you find disturbing or that you disagree or agree with more?
Everything that Gautam has said, I highly agree with. But the two aspects which really drew my attention was, one, the way he describes is the great admiration and respect and love that he had for his wife. I think that comes out very, very clearly. And the great admiration and how and the respect he had for her, that, you know, and he puts it down very eloquently and with no holds barred. You almost get to know Anuradha through the book. The second thing is that I think his in-depth analysis of casteism and his understanding of casteism, and this I've had a lot of chats with him also on the side. Whenever we meet, we talk about caste and his analysis of caste and how he really, the communists generally consider the caste problem as a class problem. Kobe doesn't take that for granted. And I think that was the other very, very important theological point that he makes, that caste stands on its own. These were the two things which, and then then I've, you know, every time I meet Kobad and we are talking and I see the serenity on his face and I look at what the guy's gone through. You know, how can you put an individual through this? How inhuman can the state become? Why the state? How inhuman can human beings become to each other? And very, very good. And, you know, Kobad's detail of Afzal's hanging, you know, it's gone viral in Kashmir. My brother-in-law is very involved with the Kashmir movement, and he said, and he knows Kobad very well. He's also a DOSCO, ex-DOSCO. And these insights which he gave us of Afzal Guru's hanging, or indeed how a hanging takes place, you know, these were all very, very revealing things, and I really enjoyed reading the book.
So, Kobad, you've clearly experienced a lot in your life, and you know, the audience can read your book, Fractured Freedom, but there's this one bit that, you know, having interacted with you virtually, you know, the last time, and I've heard about you from many of your classmates and juniors in school. There's this one bit from your book. It says there were two big dons, Delhi's notorious Kishan Pehelwan and one Fazlur Rahman, in my ward in Tihar. And I happened to be put in a cell with the former on my very first night in jail. Kishan Pehelwan, KP, was famous for the many murders he had reportedly committed and his close connection with the Chautala political family of Haryana. He was feared by all and was said to own large amounts of land, mostly believed to be seized from others, and wealth over 100 crores. He was said to be implicated in over 80 murder cases. He belonged to Dichau village of the Haryana-Delhi border. Kishan Pehelwan had a running battle with one Uday Veer and his family, who were the richest people in the neighborhood village. And you have spoken about these characters you met. Now, how does a man like you, Parsi from a, you know, educated, fairly privileged middle class family of Bombay, who went to Doon and went to London to study, end up in a ward with KP and Fazlu? Like, what do you even say? Like, what was it like? Describe to me. Surely it's not like being in the dorm when you joined Doon with Ishaat and Gautam. It's clearly a different kettle of fish. Were you scared? Were you petrified? How did these guys react to you? Like, what was common?
Fazlur Rahman was a jolly sort of fellow. He wasn't all like that. But Kishan Pehelwan, I mean, this was new to me. I just came in touch with him, and I was there in his cell for just a night. After that, I was shifted to another cell with Khalistani. But there was really, he was more of the local type of mafia and did not have much. But I met even much bigger dons than him, like Brijesh Singh. He's probably the biggest don in the country from Banaras. And I was there with him for a whole year, and quite a gentleman sort of person. Actually, and then I was also with Sunil Rathi, who was in the news lately for killing Munna Bajrangi in inside the jail in UP. And
So
he
what did
was
you
very,
say to these guys when you met them? What did they say to
but
you? How did
no,
it get to each other?
actually, I found, and I was with this Titu Sharma, Don of Jharkhand, who was really very helpful. He was the closest, in fact, to me because he was, the Naxalites never helped me there. It was Titu Sharma who helped me because I knew no one in Jharkhand jail. And he was really very helpful and close. But, I found amongst these people a sort of respect, a sort of thinking of us as Robin Hood type of people, uh, taking from the rich, giving to the poor, that type of thing. And I really found I got on really very well with all the dons that were there and all the really big dons. And there were one or two. There was a Haryana don called RK Raj Kumar, and all of them had some story to tell. I was more interested in studying them, studying this phenomenon that was there.
But were
He
you
was
scared that what if you
no,
get into a fight or
no,
what if
no,
there's an
never,
altercation?
never, because they were so warm and considerate, most of them, that I really got on better with them than I got on with others. Uh, just the ordinary criminals who you don't have much, not Kishan Pelwan type, but some of these other people. And
But
like,
what about the police? And tell us about your experience with the police. I mean, there's a bit of decent people there. Are they victims? Are they perpetrators of an unjust system? Are they victims of the system? What is your take on the security
I,
stance?
I found everything in Delhi actually very bad. The police were like worse than criminals, I thought. The way they dealt with me also. I mean, they probably got orders from the top, but they just put me in a cage and transported me, and they would not give me any leeway. They'd give the dons leeway, but dons would tell me, but they would not give any leeway. Though they could see I was aged, I was uh, quite sick also. In fact, the judge once or twice commented, "What's happening to you? You can't even stand." Very nice judge, and he, but everywhere else, they were very considerate. I mean, I don't know why Delhi is like that, but both the jail authorities I found quite uncouth, and so also the police. But in all other places, Hyderabad and Vishaka, of course, it has an excellent tradition, so that was different. But even Punjab, Surat, even Gujarat also, and Jharkhand also, uh, all the authorities also. It was very Jharkhand
You think that
was a different case.
there are reasonable, decent people who you encounter
Of
within the
course,
state.
there was. I don't know about Delhi, but the rest of all the other places I
Really, like all
run
Bombayites,
into.
we Delhi too with good reason. But Gautam,
No, but I had very good judges in Delhi, I must say, and lawyers also. They were really very good. And a support system. You talk about Gautam was mentioning about support system. There were the human rights groups associated with the left and all that who did help. Of course, relatives also
Yeah,
helped.
what I
Relatives
wanted
helped
to
others.
ask you,
Yeah,
Bobby,
yeah,
was, you've written about the Dalit Panthers. And I know
yeah,
that during my time, one of the exciting
yeah,
subjects that came up for a journalist was the Dalit Panther movement. And we were very
yeah,
hopeful that it would lead on to changes because it had the Marxist ideology, also the need to
yeah,
overthrow the system. And you
yeah.
worked with them.
Hmm.
What was your experience of them, and why did this fade away? And is this part of the whole communist movement within India, that they don't survive for a while and then they just vanish? Is it lack of staying power, lack of unity, lack of linking arms? What is it?
No, as far as communist movement goes, Gautam, there is certainly a lot of all that, which I tried to touch on in the third section, and
Right.
the reasons for that. And you can't get two lawyers very often talking. The same group they are, but they will not talk to each other and things like that. I don't know. So I've tried to touch on that, the reasons for that out there. I wouldn't blame individuals, but
Right.
as far as the system goes of thinking, and that's why I've tried to introduce the concepts of happiness, freedom, and a new value system,
Right. Right.
because
I noticed that.
without that, I don't think this what you are talking about will ever rectify. But with the Panther movement, it was like the Black Panthers. I think it was an outburst that took place out
Yes.
here, and they styled themselves on the Black Panther in America, and it was really an explosion of the Dalit rights, the feeling of self-respect, and things like that. Some leftists, like the CPI types, were sort of linked to them. I was also linked to the leadership, but I didn't have that much influence, and I don't think the CPI never took up the caste question as such. But
Yes.
some individuals were linked to the leaders, And then after some time, the Panthers, the leadership went, some went to the Shiv Sena, some went to literary work and things like that. But I do feel that the Panther movement had its cultural and psychological impact on the Dalit movement that was to come in the future till this day. I mean, that it had, because that feeling of revolt, even the Bhim Sena that occurred so many years later in UP, was in a way, I think, linked to that. And Ishaat was mentioned that caste was a major issue of my activities and also writings and also Anu's. And we really worked. And Maharashtra has that history also of Phule, Ambedkar, Bhakti movement, of
Right.
anti-caste struggles. So it's really we carried on in that tradition,
So,
basically.
Ishaat, if you were to make a prediction of what next for Kobad, I mean, does he have more books in there that you'd like to read? Are there any stories he has told you which don't find their ways into the books that come out in the market or the articles that he writes? What would you predict he will do next, or what would you like to see him do next?
Abhinandan, before I will answer that question, but I want to ask Kobad a question. May I?
Please.
May I ask?
Do.
Kobad, of late,
Yeah.
a theory is now developing that the Dalits are being absorbed in the Hindutva fold. And quite frankly, Dalits in large numbers have voted for the BJP. Do you think this is a temporary move, or quite honestly, Hindutva has finally broken away from the mold and Dalits are very much part of mainstream Hindutva?
The problem is with Ishaat, with India, there's a caste within caste within caste within caste. We are just divided into thousands of pieces. And who feels Indian, I don't know. Everyone feels only their caste identity. And I don't think anywhere. That's why and what happens is within the Dalits, it is like in Maharashtra, it is the Mahars who have been in the forefront. In the UP, it's Chamars who have been in the forefront of Dalit assertion. When I was then briefly in Gujarat, there also I found there was one section. It's normally the highest section of the Dalits who are more educated, who have come into this assertive thing, while all the other lower sections have been roped into the Hindu fold. So it's the Chamars who might support Mayawati, but or here the Dalits who support, the Mahars who support Ambedkar. Their percentage is high, no doubt, amongst the Dalits. But then they are still a small section within the Dalit community, and the Hindutva thing has been able to appeal, even if not to them, to the other sections. And certainly the OBCs, they've been able to, which have caste feelings amongst them. But not only OBCs, even amongst the lower Dalits, like the Matangs in Maharashtra, I'm talking about, Matangs and the other lower these castes that are there, and they can be taken away by this type of thing, and that self-respect feeling which came with the Dalit Panther movement basically affected a section of the Dalits. In Maharashtra, it's the Mahars very clearly, and we, Anu and I, basically we have worked amongst Dalits all our life. In Indora, we lived in a Dalit basti, but they were all Mahars. I don't think we came across any Matang or anyone in. There were a few, also in like Kabir Kalamanji and some people, they were, I believe, Matangs, but basically they were all Mahars. So it's these other sections that have been easily taken in by all this thing. And I just read in someone in Karaman gave me this thing of a person from Rajasthan, a Dalit, who had joined the RSS, and he left it because he found casteism out there. He became a section of the leader. It was a very interesting story. He said he got influenced by the Hindutva, not by BJP or anyone, but by the Ramayana. When the Ramayana was played in the mid-80s,
That's right.
that was brought into,
yes.
yeah, that is what I remember. That we were in Nagpur that time, and it was
very popular. Very
popular. TV had just started, and it was. I remember now, even then, clearly that it was like a curfew virtually. No one would be seen on the road. That's
Literally.
those days.
In fact, I remember we had gone for midterm once,
Uh,
and on Sunday, the shops used to be deserted
Yeah.
on Shimla or Chakrata,
Look at that.
and everyone was watching TV on like one, pan ki dukan somewhere. No one would
Yeah,
serve
that's
you. Yeah, it
everywhere.
was.
Probably throughout the country, it was like that. And this fellow said he came to join the RSS. He became a this thing because of the Ramayana, basically. So, but he got disillusioned afterwards and came out and he's written this book now. But and the other section of people are not so aware, so they just stay there. So and
More work.
So Ishaat,
Yeah, so now I'll answer your
so Ishaat, now you tell me what? Yeah.
I'll answer your question now. Uh, first of all, I find it absolutely remarkable as to how composed Kobad is. I mean, Gautam was here last week and we met for lunch twice. And when we were sitting around, Kobad was chatting. You could never imagine that this Johnny had 3 years ago was going from jail to jail. So I have absolutely no doubt in my mind. He's of a very sunny nature. I have no doubt in mind that Kobad is going to be a prolific writer going forward. He already has 2 or 3 things lined up. So I can assure you that Rolly will be quite busy going forward.
And any parting words from you, Gautam, before I give
Well,
Kobad
I think this conversation should be continued now in Delhi, both Ishaat and Kobad. And of course, you are invited, Abhinandan. You are now part of our gang and you have to come. And we'll do so over a drink or a glass of beer or something stronger if you like. And the conversation should continue. That's what I would like. And come to know each other much better because I'm meeting Kobad, both Ishaat. Of course, Kobad I knew a bit more. But Ishaat, though in Bombay, I hardly ever met him because he was rising up the corporate ladder. So it'd be nice now that we are in our 70s and that we can all get together and interact and learn more about Kobad's adventure.
Sure. I would be most honored if I'm invited to that evening of you gentlemen. Though I'm not sure how often people invite people 3 decades junior to them, but I would be more than happy. But Kobad, before I once again urge the people, you've seen Kobad, you've seen what a fun, happy guy he is. Read this book and you'll understand why that is so remarkable and why his friends keep harping on it. And then you will see that guy is this guy and just try to make sense of that. But Kobad, a friend of mine had once told me that, because when I chose what I chose to do, when I did flirt with activism at one point, she says, never lose the anger in you, but don't become an angry person.
Well said. Very well said.
Really.
Very well said.
That's very true. Yeah.
So, in your case, is there an anger in you? Because you see it when you feel it when you read the book, but you don't feel it when I interact with you. What makes you in this emotional equilibrium that you are in?
You see, the thing is that even inside jail, when I would read things, I would really feel a lot of anger in me when I felt things were going wrong or unjust. And actually, it was my ability. Fortunately, Sumit Chakravarti and Mainstream took all my articles and printed it. And I felt the release of that anger in that. So it is, if there's any form of this type of justice, I do feel anger. But then I also do philosophize it. It's not against individuals, it's against the system as such. The system is bound to lead to this. And so I don't have any grudges against the people. Even the negative aspects I saw in the movement. First, I would, before I came to this level of consciousness, I would feel very irritated and angry and things like that. But now I feel that's part of the system. The movement, communist movement is built in that way. And so individuals become like that. And Anu was just an exception. I don't think she had to transform. She was sort of natural. That came naturally to her because of probably a parent and that type of atmosphere. But all of us have to struggle against our subconscious programming that is being there in childhood. And we are not very successful against it. And the communist movement doesn't help very often. So anger is very much there when we hear and see justice, see the environment breaking, the migrants, the suffering. That is very much there. But it's not against individuals or even, in fact, against the party. It's the system, as long as it remains like this, I feel these things are inevitable. And for me, it's a person, things are going to be like this unless there's an alternative. And it's that viable alternative that I'm seeking to portray, like Ishaat says, in future books also, develop those concepts and give a more viable alternative.
So we look forward to those future books. Thank you, Ishaat. Thank you, Gautam. And thank you so much, Kobad. For this, I repeat, it's called Fractured Freedom, a Prison Memoir by Kobad Ghandy, 3 decades my senior from school, and Gautam and Ishaat, who are also 3 decades my senior. Thank you, Rolly Books. And I am Abhinandan Sekhri from newslaundry.com. That doesn't take advertising. And that's why we say pay to keep news free, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Support independent media, support good literature, and support good people. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for listening, audience. We shall see you next time.